Okay, well, I guess we'll get started. If you'll all join me in a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Welcome, everyone. Mayor Hodson will not be joining us tonight. He's got some other business that he's got to tend to. So I guess the first order of business will be the approval of the minutes. Is there a motion or any amendments? Any thoughts? I would entertain a motion for approval if there's no amendments.
So moved.
Okay.
I second it.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Gornick and seconded by Mayor Stemple. All those in favor? Well, anyone in opposition, raise your hand. Okay, looks unanimous. The minutes are approved. Thank you so much.
And I'll just add, there's a few updates that need to happen on the general information page, and I will be making those for the next meeting.
Okay. Okay. So with that, we are joined today by our great staff, Jill Smith and Vahid Brown. And I guess we'll just turn it over to Jill. And need any help, Jill, with anything, or are you ready to go?
Vahid has a slideshow he's going to share.
Trent, do you want to enable sharing for me?
I do want to do that. That's what I want to do. It's coming. You should be good now.
Okay, I think I'll just jump in. Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for the opportunity to talk to you about Measure 26210. It's the measure that is a regional measure involving Clackamas, Washington, and Multnomah counties. And it's all about providing enough funding to the region to actually end chronic homelessness. And Clackamas County is so excited. We are on a path to begin this work, and we're going to talk to you about what the work looks like and where we are. And at the end of this, we would like to hear from you about how you would like to be engaged moving forward in this work, this exciting work. So I'm Jill Smith. I didn't introduce myself. I'm the Director of Housing and Housing Services for Clackamas County. And Vahid will be doing most of the presentation. Vahid is actually the manager of the Supportive Housing Services Program, which is a brand new position at Clackamas County. So congratulate him. And I'll turn it over to Vahid.
Thank you, Jill. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to talk a little bit about the measure and what it aims to achieve and how it's structured, and then give some updates on the work that we've undertaken to move the measure forward in Clackamas County thus far. Measure 26210, the Supportive Housing Services measure, is, as Jill said, meant to address the needs of our most vulnerable people experiencing long-term homelessness. And a little bit about homelessness in Clackamas County. As city and county leaders, none of you are going to be surprised to know that we have a crisis. This is well known to all of us. This is some of the sobering numbers and statistics that I think have become very familiar to us about the numbers of people experiencing homelessness in our communities. These numbers and data are looking at kind of 2019-ish because of the interruptions due to COVID. We all three counties used 2019 data as baseline data for our plans, and as we looked ahead to implementation of the measure. CHA in the 2019 CHA, CHA stands for Coordinated Housing Access. That's the number that folks in Clackamas County can call to be assessed for eligibility for any and all homeless services programs in the county. So it's our most accurate day-to-day picture of the number of members of our community who are needing that kind of assistance. So as you can see, in 2019, almost 2,000 people were experiencing homelessness in Clackamas County. 36% of them were chronically homeless. 2018 study by the Clackamas County Children's Commission Head Start programs found that 65% of preschool age Head Start kids were experiencing homelessness. I wonder if there's a participant who can mute. I'm hearing a.
Yeah, could everyone mute for now, please?
Thank you, Commissioner Savas. Recently, a survey by Clackamas Community College found that 40% of their enrolled students had reported experiencing homelessness in the previous year. The folks in our wait lists who are experiencing long-term homelessness and have a disabling condition are eligible for permanent supportive housing programs. And the supportive housing services wait list in 2019 had 605 people on it. And at the rate at which people are taken off of the wait list and placed into programs before this measure happens and before these resources come to the county, it would take us 22 years to clear that wait list from 2019. The measure is also really, as Jill said, meant to end chronic homelessness in our region. And as we know, that's been on the rise. 2015 to 2017 point in time counts and those from 2017 to 2019 both saw sharp increases in the number of people experiencing chronic homelessness. The measure itself, the supportive housing services measure, which was passed in May last year by voters in the 3 counties in the metro region, was created by a coalition called Here Together. It's a coalition of service providers and business leaders and community members, social service agencies. The measure is estimated to raise for Clackamas County at full revenue collection, $53 million annually. For our year 1 planning efforts for the first year of implementation of the measure in Clackamas County, we've been told to anticipate $24.5 million. And that's due to 2 reasons. The reason it's much smaller than the anticipated number at full revenue collection is twofold: COVID impacts, and just any new tax takes time to have kind of full compliance and collection across the community. The revenue is based on 2 taxes: a marginal income tax on high income earners and a 1% business profits tax on businesses that make more than $5 million in the region, in the metro region. The funds, the revenue from the Here Together measure are meant to be flexible and to give the implementing jurisdictions whatever it takes flexibility to end chronic homelessness and provide the necessary services to these most vulnerable members of our community. It's not a highly prescriptive measure. It says that these dollars can support programs that provide a whole host of interventions to end people's homelessness and to provide the appropriate levels of services to help them remain and stay successful in their housing, including supportive housing services, which can be a broad range of things: in-home healthcare, behavioral health services, addiction and recovery services, employment assistance, benefit recovery services, a wide range of things. Long and short-term rent assistance, housing placement and navigation services to find, identify people experiencing homelessness, connect them with rent subsidy and help them find and secure housing on the market. Eviction prevention for folks who are at risk of experiencing homelessness, as well as emergency housing, shelter and transitional housing. The measure also has an emphasis on, as Jill already mentioned, meeting the needs of the most vulnerable people experiencing homelessness, chronically homeless people. It also recognizes the disproportionate impact of housing insecurity and homelessness on communities of color, and asks all of the implemented communities to lead with race equity, identify racial inequalities in our homeless services systems, and implement programs to reverse and kind of overcome those inequities within our programs, so that communities of color do not experience worse outcomes in our homeless and housing services than other members of the community. So as it says here, communities of color and those disproportionately impacted by homelessness, as well as people with disabilities who are experiencing or are at risk of experiencing long-term homelessness, are the real priority population for this measure. And the revenue spending for each jurisdiction is broken into a 3/4, 1/4 requirement. So we are all required, the 3 counties implementing this measure, to identify programs and commit resources in this breakdown, with 75% of the revenue going to meet the housing needs of folks who are long-term homeless or chronically homeless, who have a disabling condition, very extremely low incomes, and are experiencing lengthy periods of homelessness, with 25% of the revenue going to programs to support households who are experiencing homelessness or who are at risk of experiencing homelessness. The local implementation plan, which all 3 counties were required to develop before receiving the revenue this year, was developed in Clackamas County through extensive community engagement and outreach. This is a somewhat wordy slide, I apologize, but there's a lot that isn't on this slide. 20 virtual engagements were conducted by HAC staff, Housing Authority staff, and consultants with community advisory groups and organizations. We had 2 culturally specific organizations that we contracted with, Unite Oregon and the Coalition of Communities of Color, to conduct engagement specifically with communities of color in Clackamas County to help inform this plan. We met with all sectors of the community, service providers, faith-based organizations, business communities, the general public. We had 2 public meetings as well as a public survey, a general survey for the public. Met with the law enforcement community, with emergency medical providers, schools. A lot of engagement went into this plan. We also had a local steering committee that informed the development of the plan across the last 5 months. That local committee, the steering committee, had 11 members that are community members, which represented a diverse array of backgrounds, races, and ethnicities. Had almost a third of its members had lived experience of homelessness. More than half of the at-large members were people of color, and it also included a non-voting member who is a Clackamas County Commissioner. In the course of our engagement, we always asked 3 questions, and I want to highlight the most frequent responses, the things that we heard from our community when we went and asked the 3 questions, among others, but we always asked 3. We were looking to understand how the community saw the most critical gaps in our homeless services system of care, what barriers communities of color experiencing and accessing services in Clackamas County, and what priority investments community members would lift up for us to consider as we develop the plan. When asked about gaps, these bullets were the most frequently cited things as significant gaps in the homeless system of care in Clackamas County. Behavioral health, not a surprise. Oregon struggles to meet the needs of people with respect to behavioral health. We often rank last in the nation with when it comes to access to behavioral health care or adequate access to behavioral health resources. Transitional and emergency housing, so that included shelter. So second, folks said there needs to be places for people to go immediately who are experiencing homelessness. Not enough rental assistance, not enough outreach to folks in the community who are experiencing homelessness. Barriers and red tape with respect to accessing services to get screened for eligibility, and an overall lack of supportive housing, difficulties navigating the system, and a lack of programs that develop life skills to maintain independence. These are the top answers to that question. In our engagements with the community, when we asked them what are the primary barriers to communities of color in accessing our system of care, we heard repeatedly that we have a lack of culturally specific and culturally appropriate services and information in the community. We heard a lot from communities of color about mistrust of government. A lot of that went along with references to public charge, which is a federal policy of the previous administration relating to accessing government-funded services by folks who are seeking legal citizenship and who are not yet citizens. Disproportionate issues facing communities of color with respect to leasing up apartments, rental screening barriers, and just general barriers in accessing services. And then when we ask the community what should be the priority investments, this is what the community told us. Shelter and emergency housing with services attached to it, or transitional housing, or transitional shelter is another phrase we've used. Low or no barrier behavioral health services, mental health and addiction support services, improving service navigation and integration, more supportive housing, and generally more housing. We heard that over and over and over again. There's not enough housing in general in the community. The plan itself, the local implementation plan, is a high-level strategic framework that all three counties were required to develop in the work to prepare to receive these funds according to this measure. It must meet required elements. So there's these are all kind of listed on the slide. The plan has to conduct an analysis of racial disparities in the homeless services and in housing in the county. Survey current investments and provide a look at how currently funds are invested in the community, whether they're federal, state, or local funds, gaps in those investments. So a needs analysis had to be done to assess unmet need. So the current investments versus the need and what's the gap. It had to articulate strategies to address the racial disparities that we discovered, which we did. So strategies to advance racial equity in the provision of services, strategies for the equitable distribution of services within the jurisdiction, the metro jurisdiction of Clackamas County, and an articulation of the planned investments for the measure in at least the initial phase of implementation. And were the survey funding priorities ranked by response rate as a question in the chat? Yes, they were. Looking ahead, I'm going to turn it over to Jill to kind of describe the timeline as we move from the development of local implementation plan towards implementation.
So we've been working hard on this ever since this measure passed, and the last 6 months have been spent on community engagement, listening to folks in need and folks to help us do this work in the community and just the public. And we've got to the point where we are at the blue in the middle. My pointer won't work. Vahid, you'll have to point for me. Plan review and approval by the Housing Authority of Clackamas County Board will happen on April 13th, hopefully. We have posted the draft plan pending their approval on our website if you're interested. The commission has received that, and they're having the opportunity to review and weigh in and direct staff if they want any changes or adjustments. Once they approve the plan, it then goes to the Regional Oversight Committee, which is a group that Metro oversees and helps to administer, and each county has equal representation on that. And the board right after the passage of this measure, went through a very rigorous selection process. And Clackamas County has 5 excellent representatives on that oversight committee. And then we will shortly after that approval, it'll go to Metro Council for adoption along with an IGA, which our board has to approve. And at the same time that we're going through that approval process, we are putting together an RFP, because our intent is to push this funding out as soon as we, to be ready to push it out as soon as we receive it. And our intent is for the majority of this funding to go out into the community, to be provided to people in need by community providers across the entire region and across Clackamas County. Our categories for procurement will include several of the areas that were identified as priorities through our community outreach and engagement, going out into the communities and connecting with homeless people and helping them engage in services and linked services. We have funding that we'd like to invest in shelter and transitional housing, which is immediate for people who don't have anywhere to go, where they can stabilize and move into the next step, which hopefully is supportive housing. Housing navigation is the services that help the folks navigate a sometimes very challenging private rental market. things like deposit assistance would be provided so we can get folks placed. And the idea is that they're not just housed, but they're provided the housing as well as the services that each individual might need to stay housed successfully. And then we also have a slice of this funding that can be used for prevention for people who maybe with just a small infusion of funding can stay housed and never move into all the trauma associated with becoming homeless. And we're excited. We hope that we have contracts in place, at least several, by July 1st when we receive funding. That is our goal. Unfortunately, one of the biggest challenges of this measure is the fact that we are restricted from using this funding outside of the metro urban growth boundary. So for Clackamas County, that's especially challenging because it only represents about half of our county. And there are challenges, housing challenges, poverty challenges. A lot of the communities of color that live in Clackamas County live outside the UGB. So we will be working on, with the approval and direction of our board, of course, transitioning current funding that's not related to the measure to be redirected as contracts expire over this first year to outside the urban growth boundary. And our hope is that we can be RFPing those funds simultaneously, transitionally as contracts expire. And again, our hope is to contract with service providers that work outside the UGB to serve their communities. It really is a best practice that people are willing, feel safe, engaging with entities that look like them, that are in their neighborhoods, that they're comfortable talking to. More folks will seek services and seek help that way. Those resources are just some of the resources that we will be asking the board to support prioritizing outside the urban growth boundary in the coming year. And at this point, I'll turn it over to all of you for questions of Vahid and I. And we would really, in addition to questions, like to understand how you would like to engage with us as we build this system. Again, we've been charged with developing a regional system that will end chronic homelessness in Clackamas County and across our region. Our goal is that as people experience traumas in their life and challenges and become homeless or housing insecure, they have somewhere in their neighborhood, somewhere they feel safe and comfortable going for help. So I'll turn it over to you with that.
Okay, great. Right, I see the first hand up is Mayor Walters. We can't hear you.
You might be muted.
When she turned her mic on. She was muted, but essentially we cannot hear her. You can type in your question, Mayor, perhaps under chat, and then we'll go to Ed Gronke next, followed by Mayor Stemple.
I have a question. I think it's probably for Vahid. Given the money available, is this enough to actually handle the homeless problem in Clackamas County?
I believe it is enough to end chronic homelessness in Clackamas County. I think that when this measure was passed, we did not know, none of us knew about the devastating impacts of COVID. We still don't know how those are going to play out for housing for very low income folks in our communities. There's still a lot of unknowns there. There are pressures with respect to the rising costs of housing that are outpacing the increases in wages across the labor market that have been driving increases in homelessness in our region for many years. Those are not addressed by the measure, but I do believe that having become quite familiar with our wait lists and really with the people on them, to be honest, and in the community, knowing what programs exist and the resources behind them and how slow it is at the moment to move folks through a very slow system of calling in, getting assessed, and being on a wait list to receive services that sometimes is years coming. These resources are going to change that. Working with my colleagues in Health, Housing, and Human Services that administer our coordinated housing access system, when we look at our goals and our year one goals and our projections looking forward with the numbers of long-term rent assistance vouchers that we can administer with this program, we can clear the wait list that currently exists for people needing supportive housing in less than 4 years. So to me, I feel very hopeful and optimistic about what these resources can do for the county. Whether this is enough to end homelessness, I think there remain other factors that have to do with federal and state histories of disinvestment that need to be corrected as well. But I don't want to editorialize, so I'll stop there. Jill, if you want to add anything to that.
All I want to add is that 75% of this funding initially has to be directed to serve the chronic disabled people that have experienced long-term homelessness. In 4 years, if we are able to effectively serve that population, we are authorized to redirect this funding to other populations, to people that aren't as challenged with long-term homelessness and disabilities. And so we can really make a big impact there as well. And this is a 10-year measure. Hopefully, if we do a good job, it would be considered for renewal.
Okay. It looks like Mayor Walters has typed in her question. Can you see that, Jill? Fahid?
Yeah, I'm bringing it up. She says, I was surprised that 47% of CCC students had experienced homelessness in the previous year. How does that compare to other community colleges in Oregon and nationally? That's a really good question. Vahid and I added that data point because we met with staff from Clackamas Community College just a few days ago. They do regular surveys of their student body and were frightened by that statistic. And they're hoping to build housing, affordable housing on their campus, which is why they were talking to us. But I don't know the statistics. Does anyone else have those numbers?
I do know the source for the Clackamas County numbers that was cited in their fall mailer of last season. It was the hashtag Real College Survey Report by the Hope Center at Temple University. So I don't have the statistics at my fingertips, Mayor Walters, but the Real College Survey Report by the Hope Center at Temple University is the source for that statistic for Clackamas Community College. So I assume this is a national survey.
Great. Was there any other questions that Mayor Walters had in her chat?
Yes, there was one more. Do we have numbers on LGBTQ students and especially trans youth? That is an excellent question. And we have, so I would say my two-part answer is no, and we will soon. So no, our system, many of our systems do not really adequately collect that kind of demographic information of folks that we serve. They haven't historically. When the county received federal funding for a youth homelessness demonstration program, which is a competitive federal HUD award that Clackamas County went for and successfully won in 2019, a significant increase in our federal funding for homeless services with that award. The planning team for the youth homelessness demonstration program, one of the things they've identified to HUD and have articulated in their plan is that we do not adequately understand the needs of our youth and our queer LGBTQ and trans youth for housing and homeless and housing services in the county or anywhere in the country. and they're developing a program to change that. So I'm proud of my colleagues. We're working to address that gap in our knowledge.
And in response to Councilor Lewis, she posted PCC listed 14% in 2019. During the meeting, they told us that when they surveyed their student body for what they'd experienced in the prior year related to housing insecurity or homelessness, it was 49%. So I think it was a little broader than just actual homelessness. People that had been like couch surfing, things like that were included.
Okay, great. Next up is Mayor Stemple.
Hello, everybody. I just want to first say I apologize if I'm going to offend anybody. That's probably not the best way to start this. But Jill and Vahid, you guys are doing an amazing job. Absolutely amazing. You guys knock it out of the ballpark. You're in the trenches. You know what these people are going through, and you want to help as quickly as you can. And what I'm seeing with this is all of the administration, the meetings, the policy creations, the outreach, the multiple reviews, and on and on and on, all of the things that delay putting people in actual homes. That's not acceptable. These people are suffering today. And I'm seeing that we're not going to even be able to do anything until for a year. Is this because of Metro's requirements? Is it the county? Is it the state? What is stopping this from happening right now? And what can I do to help push that forward? I run across these people that are homeless today, multiple times a week, and this is doing nothing for them, absolutely nothing. We need to stop talking about it. We need to start doing it. So I'm sorry if I offended anybody, but I'm really passionate about this, and I'm tired of talking about it. We got to do it.
I share your passion, Mayor, and the tax is starting to be collected the first quarter of this year. It's just starting to come in. We are required to complete this planning and engagement process, as well as an IGA between Metro and the county to qualify to receive the funding. So we are checking the boxes we have to check to ensure Clackamas County gets its funding so that we can engage. Our goal is to be ready to engage July 1st, the second we're eligible to get this money. So we're doing our best, but I agree with you. There's a lot of hurdles.
And what do we have to do to get rid of some of those? That's my heartburn, is we have to do something to give you the ability to take care of this situation now. Again, whatever I can do, please reach out. I'm there for you guys.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. Next up is Mayor-elect. I'm not sure if you're technically sworn in yet as Mayor. Mayor Smith from Morgan City.
Thank you. So Jill, I think on your slide, you asked about what we would like to hear about going forward. So I have 2 items going forward, and then I have a question. So going forward, the bare minimum is I'd like to know what projects are approved and where they're located, and some details about the projects. And then we talk a lot about this being a regional system. This is a regional problem. I'm interested in knowing what is the regional coordination? Like, where's the evidence? Are we connecting the dots? Where's the outcomes that are saying that, we're targeting services here, and we know about services that are available in another county or in another city, and there's coordination? Because to me, I'm afraid that this becomes another side load. Clackamas County has their plan, and Washington County has their plan, and Multnomah has their plan, and I think we'll all acknowledge that it's regional, and there's concerns about some cities having higher numbers of homelessness, and then providing services, and then drawing more homelessness to particular community because they are offering services. So I just would like to know more. I'm not sure that you have the answers today. You don't have to give me the answer today, but I think going forward, this is a regional This is a regional measure, and I would like to hear a little bit more about that regional component in additional to what's happening in Clackamas County. Because I think that's information that not only would my commission like to hear and needs to hear, but also our community. And then my question is about the Clackamas County Homeless Solutions Coalition. Where do you see that organization fitting in and helping or supporting or you know, they're organized, they're, you know, but I feel like they could do more, and I'd like to hear more about how you're coordinating with that organization, or if you are working with them, and what they could help with.
Fahid, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, great question. Thank you, Mayor Smith. I am a founding member of the Homeless Solutions Coalition of Clackamas County. I'm no longer a member of the kind of the executive board. I stepped down after I took the position as the Supportive Housing Services Manager, but a member of my team, Abby Ahern, remains a member of the advisory board of the Homeless Solutions Coalition. We communicate with them frequently. The board members and advisory board members are also, I was in a meeting with several of them today, you know, as part of an outreach coordination effort that we have a meeting every month of folks that are engaged in outreach in the community. We work closely with the Homeless Solutions Coalition. I think I am also eager to know what their vision is for how they would like to support the implementation of the measure. I know that they're excited about it. We've been talking about it for over a year. I think they have ideas. We do have a procurement coming out, and we will have more. This is the first procurement of what will be many. And I am excited to hear how what the vision of the coalition is to how they can support the work. I think that the coalition's real, one of the values they bring to the community is as a convener and a consciousness raiser about the issues and a connector. All of those things are going to be critical to the success of this work. Convening of our community partners and of sectors that need to coordinate, raising awareness about the issues and the needs in the community, and connecting the right people to the right issues. So they're well placed to be a key partner. I know that I want to just speak very briefly to your first question or kind of observation about regionalism. The development of the plans has been a very regional effort. We meet staff with my counterpart in the Supportive Housing Services Program Managers of Washington and Multnomah County on a weekly basis. We coordinate around the development of policies for long-term rent assistance and how those will be administered. So many of the nuts and bolts of the program are already being developed on a regional basis. And the measure requires a regional advisory body to continue to guide the work on a regional level. That hasn't been established yet. That's to be determined. So I can't speak for the future. I don't have a crystal ball, but I can say that up to now, there has been good regional coordination in the development of the plans.
Okay, thank you.
So we got about 6 minutes left for questions and answers. So next up is Martin Myers, and then we'll transition to our next presentation.
All of this is really good news. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm curious, though, to know a little bit more about the monies that this will potentially free up for the areas outside of the urban growth boundary. I wonder if you have any kind of approximate dollar amount, what that might be, and how those programs would be implemented. Would they run parallel with these efforts, or would there be other efforts involved? Thank you.
So if I could answer this one, Jill, the total of funding that supports homeless services programs of the type that this measure will fund moving forward within the metro boundaries that Clackamas County receives on an annual basis is about $8 million. And that's exclusive of Housing Authority funding. So the Housing Authority, Section 8 voucher programs and so forth are not included in that $8 million. So that's federal continuum of care dollars, that's state SHAP and ESG dollars that support outreach, rapid rehousing, and shelter, and commitments made by the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners to homeless services from the general fund, which includes the $1.2 million annual affordable housing and services fund. So again, $8 million. Much of that money, the largest urban areas of Clackamas County are in the UGB. So I would say the lion's share of the programming that's funded by that $8 million is within the UGB. It serves the whole county. Those federal, state, and county dollars serve the whole county. But it is possible that much of that programming could be funded by the measure, and those $8 million that are currently being spent, or the proportion of those $8 million that are currently being spent on programming within the UGB, could be redirected to the rural areas.
Okay. Next up, we have Councilor Lewis.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Savas. I will be really quick and brief, but wanted to make sure that everyone knew that Metro's philosophy on this is that the counties are the experts. The county staff are going to be the muscle behind this. So thank you, Vahid and Jill, for being here tonight. Metro's been really lean in order to preserve resources and move it through the counties as much as possible. I believe that our FTE to administer this program, we've only hired one, and I think we're going to hire 3 or 4 more, but our team is going to be really small and focused on data, which is the place that we can play the largest and most, we bring the most expertise in data compared to real service provision. The other thing is the regional table will be set at the end of this year, but we want to get the dollars out the door, and starting in July, all 3 programs in place before we put together yet another table. So that's the regional table to your question, Mayor Lyle Smith.
Councilor Lewis, can you tell us, I believe Metro set a goal for, was it 2024 or 2025 for ending homelessness? Do you have the exact wording in front of you, or do you recall?
So it's a 10-year measure, and it's our goal to be at functional zero at the end of the 10 years.
Okay.
And again, it's functional zero of the chronically homeless population. So chronically homeless has that definition of folks who fall in and out of homelessness or experience that prolonged length of homelessness that's measured in years, not days and months, which people will always come into. And our goal is to obviously not have people transfer from an episodic homelessness incident into chronic homelessness.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have time for one more question. Mayor Gamba.
Sorry, I didn't think you were going to get to me. Thanks. And I'm sorry I missed part of the presentation. I just found out a half hour ago that Kathy wasn't going to be able to make it. So I did have a question watching sort of what's happening with the Clackamas County budget. It's sort of pre-assuming this money coming in. And it kind of looks like there might be money that's coming out of H3S and going towards things like the courthouse that essentially this money is replacing, which goes to Martin's question partially, but it also goes to the fact that we could be committing maybe more now than we are. Am I misreading that process?
The only thing I know, Mayor, I don't believe there's anything, unless Jill knows of something, there's no initiative or effort to move money from H3S to the courthouse whatsoever. So I'm not sure where that, love to sit down with you and figure out where you saw that or glean that, but we'll definitely want to get in front of it. We've got some messaging out there, but happy to circle back with you.
Budget's absolutely my weak point, so it could be me completely misreading it.
Right.
Yeah, that's the first I heard of it. I agree with Commissioner Savas. I don't see that happening. That's not. I don't know.
Not in the cards.
What?
Yeah.
Not in the cards. Not in the future.
Good. Well, that's
Not
good.
aware of that at all, Mayor Gamba. I haven't heard that at all.
That's good. I think this money is, as I understood it, is predominantly for services. It's predominantly to help people be successful in housing.
Mm-hmm.
In order for them to be successful in housing, they have to be in housing.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that, you know, that process is longer and harder and more expensive. Our planning commission hearing went well, as I understand it. So we're on tap to do the, you know, just shy of 500 new units. But that whole process, in my mind, is the part that needs to speed up and get more creative. Hopefully there's a little more coming out of the feds around this issue so that we can push harder. But the thing that cities can be doing right now, today, to answer Mayor Stempel's question earlier, is to start land banking. Is, you know, cities can become aware of lots that become available much sooner than anybody else, and can pick up a lot that, you know, 4 units or 20 units or whatever could be built on. We did that a while back with TriMet and picked up a unit that, or a lot about 1.5 acres that we're going to be putting affordable housing on. And I think that's going to be part of the strategy that cities can engage in that will speed up the process, because having a place to put housing is one of the hardest things.
So we're out of time. Maybe Councilor Pratt could type in her question in her chat, and Jill and Vahid, if you could help answer her question, that'd be great. And then we will now transition to our 7:30 item, the Transit Development Plan update. Karen, are you ready to go?
I am moving her in now, and while she's moving over, and while Jill and Vahid are still here, I mean, I heard them ask a question: how does C4 want to be engaged? How do you want to keep this conversation going? I didn't really hear anybody jump on that particular question. So I know that this group in the past has been very interested in housing conversations and wanting to have more housing conversations. So knowing that they're sort of transitioning out of the conversation tonight, please email me and Commissioner Savas and Mayor Hodson and anyone on the executive committee ideas for how to bring housing topics back to this group, so that we can make sure that that is a current topic here. And it's just been a while since C4 has really touched on it. There's been so much happening with transportation, but I know that Jill and Vahid, while busy, also want to make sure that the coordination with cities is also going strong. So I'm here to help them do that. I'm here to help you be in contact with them so that those services can work together.
Thank you for citing that, Trent. Appreciate it. So I'm looking for Karen. Is she in the room?
I'm in the room. Hi, great. Excellent. Well, thank you all for having me this evening. I have a presentation about the Transit Development Plan. Some of you who have been as part of C4 for a while and may remember this. We've actually been here and talked with C4 2 other times. So let me just go ahead, share my screen, and get the presentation started. And I will see from the beginning. Right, so we're at C4 this evening. We have just at the final stages of wrapping up a transit development plan. And this is a project that we have been working with our partners for the past year. Actually, it's been over a year and almost 2 and probably 2.5 since we applied for funding. So for those of you who are new to this conversation, in 2017, the state legislature passed HB 2017, which created a new source of funding for transit. And HB 2017 funds created a statewide transportation improvement fund. And that is a fund that's dedicated to funding for improving and expanding public transportation service in Oregon. And that comes from an employee tax from anyone that's working in Oregon. But in order to be able to access these funds, and this is kind of the critical part, is that there needs to be projects in a plan. And since there are areas in Clackamas County that are outside of transit districts, we had certain areas that would connect our existing transit districts that we wanted to look at to see if they were appropriate for transit service. But we also wanted to look at our urban areas and those areas within TriMet to understand how we could best provide input into the TriMet plan. So really there are 3 things that the goals of our transit development plan, it was to identify connections in areas with no service. So I talked about that. Provided a coordinated vision for transit service in Clackamas County, and identify actions we need to improve this transit use. So we really did look at it in two different kind of buckets. One is those areas within TriMet. A lot of times people associate transit mostly with TriMet, but we actually have 7 different transit providers in Clackamas County. So this map is probably really hard to read. It's got a lot going on, but I think the most important thing is that the different colored lines are provided by different service providers. So we have transit provided by SMART in Wilsonville. The South County Clackamas Transportation District serves Molalla and connections to Canby and Oregon City. There is the Canby Area Transit. There's South Sandy Area Transit. There is TriMet. There is Clackamas Community College provides a link between Oregon City and its campus, Harmony campus. And then there's Clackamas County provides a shuttle service and a Mountain Hood Express all the way up to Timberline. So you can also see though on this map that there are some areas here that there aren't connections of transit. And so if you want to go directly from Estacada to Molalla by transit, you can't do that. Or conveniently, more easily come to Oregon City, there are places where transit does not exist. So as a part of this project, we had a variety of different layers of outreach. And again, like one of the things that I had mentioned earlier is that we twice during this process, we came to C4. Those were really helpful meetings. From those meetings, we ended up going to the city of West Lynn and gave the presentation about the transit development plan there, as well as to Tualatin. We had some follow-up meetings with CPOs, so we were able to reach out to broader numbers of groups. We also had a project advisory committee, a technical advisory committee, had representatives from each of the jurisdictions and the different service providers. And we worked all of this together. There were online surveys, and all of this was used to kind of guide this transit development plan. Kind of a high level, really quick, how we did the transit development plan and came up with these different connections is that we undertook a needs assessment and we identified these corridors. We did a demand analysis and looked at travel patterns, tried to understand where travel was occurring and where there might be demand for additional transit. We also looked really closely at different options that of those different connections. And we did an online survey to get input about the different options. And then finally, we had different recommended routes, and we ended up with a series of recommendations. So hopefully many of you were able to look at the executive summary that was included. There was a link included in your packet. It's kind of a really nice brief. I think it's about 15-page version of the kind of summarizes the transit development plan. So kind of the categories of recommendations that we had new connections, connecting places that didn't have connections, where connections didn't exist today. There's new local service. So it's kind of like the new connections are connecting Estacada to Oregon City. So that's kind of a new connecting kind of 2 large areas. But there are also areas that may need local service. So being able to identify that. But then there are also some areas that have transit service now, but need more. So those were kind of the buckets and types of projects. And this here is just a really high level overview map of where the needs are. Kind of the darker color red indicates more trips, more runs are needed in those areas through all of that different analysis. So with that, one of the kind of the heart of the information that's in the transit development plan is a set of recommended projects. We bundled into short-term recommendations, medium-term, and long-term. The short-term are the grouping. It's just these 5 recommendations, and each of these kind of has had a head start. They might have planning already underway, and they just don't have money for operations. That is, many of those fall into this category. They're already on a plan and they're expected to be funded soon. So let me just kind of talk about those right now. Here's a map of those 5 projects. If you you probably don't recall, but one of the largest red indicators on that map that showed us the need, where we could see a need for additional runs, was along Highway 43, but also connecting, because there is no connection between Oregon City and I-5, kind of along 205. There's really the possibility for that. So in the short term, we're looking at how can we address those needs in more, what's the first step we need to take to address those needs? And so those are some short-term recommendations about connecting Wilsonville up to the Clackamas Town Center, and then being able to expand a shuttle in Tualatin to be able to connect to that particular connection. We also have some recommendations related to, we have been doing some planning work has been underway for a shuttle in Milwaukee. So that was on the short-term list as well. And then connecting down here along Jennings up into the Clackamas Regional Center area. That is a project that's been on the TriMet service enhancement plans. So those are the short-term recommendations. The next bucket, and so all of these are, you can find them both in the executive summary and in the larger document if you really want to kind of get down into the weeds of it all. But the medium-term recommendations, there's a total of, well, it looks like 12 of those, and they fall kind of more across the board. So I won't go through all of these recommendations, but again, I'll talk a little bit to the map of these medium-term recommendations. So in that category, what you're finding is an example of a medium-term recommendation here is that during the City of Sandy's process for updating their master plan, their transit master plan, they really identified an interest to be able to connect the City of Sandy more directly with the Clackamas Town Center. So being able to, again, kind of connect Sandy to Boring and then to the Clackamas Town Center. Currently, if you're in Sandy, you got to go all the way up to Gresham and then up to the Gateway and then back down. So that's this MT9. So that's kind of a new connection. It's like a medium-term connection recommendation. Another medium-term recommendation has to do with how can we start to provide some type of service that would connect Estacada to Clackamas to Oregon City more directly. And what that might be, and it is, I believe, like a deviated route service. So something, not necessarily a large bus going down Redland Road, but how can we serve this area better? So that kind of fell into that category of a new connection as well. And then some of these recommendations also have to do with, hey, we know there's service there already, but in kind of a few years out, there'll probably be a need for more service. So those are our medium-term recommendations. So the next grouping is the longer term recommendations. Those longer term recommendations, again, fall into that idea, hey, we have service there already, be able to improve and increase the number of runs. So there's a series of those. I also wanted to call out, though, that there are also kind of a series of connections down to the south that would be new connections. And that's this LT12, LT13, LT14. I'll show you those on a map. And so those are the connections that would be like from Molalla and connecting more towards Woodburn, perhaps connecting Molalla down to the south along 213 to Silverton. I think there was one other one that was there. I'm going to go back for a second just because I can't remember. Oh, yes. And then the C2C corridor, this connection along 172nd, really as 172nd fills out and is more populated, how can we really get that better, more direct connection from Gresham down into the Clackamas industrial area? So those are kind of examples of the type of recommendations that we have in this plan. And so finally, in addition to those different, very clear sort of connections that have been identified as needs, there were also a series of other recommendations included. It talked about the fact that there are different funding sources. So we really, the plan was built upon the need to be able to have a way to direct the STIF funds. But there are other funding sources out there that we might want to be thinking about for different types of improvements. And some of those have to do with these implementation and actions that are needed to support transit service. So things not just about increasing service, but perhaps we need additional sidewalks in places, and we need fare coordination, and what type of technology investments would be good. So all of those things, there are different kind of sets of recommendations that fall in there. And then really importantly, a monitoring program is discussed in the transit development plan. This idea that really we need to look at this every few years, be able to assess again where the needs are, so that we really have a good guidance as to where the investment should go and which of those different recommendations should move forward. So I believe here, and I think I'm just going to go ahead and end the slideshow. Let me stop share my screen so folks can ask questions. But where we go from here is we just had a conversation with the Board of Commissioners this past week to be able to update them on the transit development plan and provide them with details. And they provided us with direction to be able to take this to a public hearing at one of their business meetings so that they can then approve this transit development plan. So that's really the next step. We're hoping to be able to schedule that in late April, if not early May. But with that, I am definitely open for questions. And I know we have a lot of other transit experts in the room. I see Dwight is in the room. He can probably answer a lot of questions about how different service providers were involved. Teresa Christofferson's in the room. She also is a service provider here at Clackamas County. So there's a lot of different people that can help us out as well.
Yeah, and I'm going to take questions here, but I do want to just kind of mention something. And thank you, Karen, for pointing out Dwight and Teresa being in the room. Years back on C4, because this had come up frequently in our retreats, transit, how do we get more transit, and the lack of funds coming our way. We asked all of our transit providers, we have more transit providers than any other county in the region, to work together to address some issues and coordinate, and they've done an outstanding job doing that. And so we are getting a lot of bang for the buck, and the coordination and the expansion of some of the services and the crossover between some areas and others. So they are making their interconnections to one another, and I just want to applaud them for that. I think the larger question might be at some point, it's going to throw this out for anyone's input, is this something, because it came up at prior retreats, as I mentioned, is this something that you're perhaps all interested in bringing up at a retreat and having a deeper discussion on? There's a lot of material in here, so it'd be a more lengthy discussion that's probably more suited for retreat, but no one needs to answer that question if they don't like to. And I'll stop there. And I think Councilor Pratt, is your hand up, or is that your hand up for the housing discussion? Okay, so sounds like you're taking your hand down. Okay, great. Mayor Gamba, you're up next.
Hi, thanks. Great presentation. I'm curious about how your methodology sort of explored where the needs were. In other words, did it assume the current system or the current roadways, or did it just look at where people live and where people work and how can we move the most number of people even if it doesn't exist? And I'll explain that a little further so it makes sense, which I know I don't make sense most of the time. There's a lot of people that live in Oak Grove, Milwaukee, Gladstone, that work in West Lynn, Lake Oswego, Tualatin. In other words, they need a good east-west connector. And as of now, there is no infrastructure, between the Selwood Bridge and the Arch Bridge or 205. Did you guys explore the need for that kind of a route, even though the infrastructure doesn't exist?
Right. So we didn't as much look at infrastructure specifically. We were really looking at where people, a little bit more to what you were saying, we were looking at where people lived and where people worked, right? And a few of the things that became clear was that I believe it's 40% of the people that live in Clackamas County work out in Washington County, right? So it was kind of at that scale that we were looking at. We saw that as a very big driver and a need out there. We also saw that there was a connection between work and where people lived, and the need to better connect Gresham and the Clackamas industrial area. So through the work that we did, the consultant team didn't call out necessarily a connection between Milwaukee specifically and Lake Oswego, but so I don't know if that was because it wasn't on that micro of a scale. I don't know exactly what the scale upon which they were looking at, but I do know that we were looking at kind of those more broader brush kind of live work.
So, but finding that there was a pretty strong need for an east-west connection that didn't go through downtown Portland.
Yes, I mean, there was definitely the connection to Washington County. But I do think there was the assumption that that connection would happen there along I-205, as it probably does right now.
Great. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Rick Cook, you're up next, sir.
Thank you, Paul. Couple of questions that as I was reading through it, says the shuttle is going to begin sometime in 2021. There's also talk about mobile hubs, and also in looking at a lot of listing, it says I-205 to Oregon City, I-5. There's 3 different providers that go through Borland. East Tualatin has a connection in there. There's a ST1 is on Rosemont Road.
Mm-hmm.
So there's lots of components to this, but I didn't really see anything like the Rosemont Road. Long Road, is that just at the Westland end, or is that going to be connected through? And how do we find out those pieces to it?
Right. I think those are excellent questions. And it helps us, it gives me the opportunity to explain how the transit development plan, at least I envision it working. Okay, so the transit development plan has provided the opportunity to identify a need, right? And start to be able to understand how that need can be addressed. And so we'll use the example of the Stafford, connecting Oregon City to Tualatin, and how that could potentially be addressed in the near term. And so we know that the need in the transit development plan's there. And we actually, for that particular area, have received some funding to think about where the planning of that route would go. And so that's where we're starting to get a little bit more detailed. Like the first step is this idea of connecting services. And I actually, kind of looking at my screen, Dwight moved around my screen because I know Dwight's been involved in these conversations. So we've had some dollars to look at planning that. So that's when it starts to get more in focus. But right now we actually don't have dollars to operate that service. And really when the dollars for operation come in, then we can really connect and be able to understand exactly where and how that service would be provided. So that's kind of a little bit of reason why it's not crystal clear exactly where that service is going to happen. But I might ask Dwight or Teresa to jump in because they are the operators of transit, and they might be able to kind of talk about that link where you go from a plan to actually operation and making all of the decisions about what road is actually going to be used and where is it going to stop and all of that kind of stuff.
All right, this is Dwight. I'll chime in a little bit. Yeah, there is a process, obviously, that transit providers like SMART, Canby, Sandy, Clackamas County undertake when trying to decide how best to run a route. And we look at job centers, we look at housing, all of those things come into play. And I think this particular study, and I really enjoyed being a part of it, and working with, I love working with the Clackamas County providers because they're doers at the end of the day. We're trying our best to get the service to where the people want it and need it. And we all had some sort of transit master plan on a shelf. that we were using kind of as a guide. And so this particular transportation development plan allowed for the consultants to reach into those plans that had already been vetted by through outreach and through the various communities that we serve. And so there was a lot of current relevant information for us to build upon. And so I think many of the recommendations that you see not only came from the work that the consultants actually did on the ground, but the work that had already been done by some of the providers, which was extremely helpful. So looking at that I-205 corridor was one of the things that was one of the plans in our transit transit master plan that rose to the top. This is the people that we surveyed said, this is where we want to go. There's some interest in Portland. I think for SMART, it's the west side that we are looking at and trying to figure out what would be the best solution for that. We go south to Salem, we go north to Tualatin. Hopefully soon we'll go kind of in that easterly direction towards northeast towards Clackamas Town Center. This is really about filling those gaps, looking at the service. TriMet, does what TriMet does, and we appreciate that. But we can do so much more, and I think the 7 of us believe that with all our hearts. And so this, to me, is a really, really positive step in that direction to better cover the region with transit for the folks that need it the most. So I'll stop talking. Teresa, you have anything to add?
Well, the only other thing I would chip in about is talking about the 2 new last mile shuttle services that we're getting up and running right now. And I think that's a really good example of how this kind of broader based planning is ultimately going to lead to a locally based service. As we've gone through the process of working with Oregon City and working with the Clackamas industrial area, we've been talking to people in the community. We've been talking with elected officials and with staff at the different city levels. And that's really enabled us, as well as private business partners and others. And that's really enabled us to start honing down where the actual needs are, what infrastructure is needed to support those shuttle services, and how we can best serve those communities as a whole. We do anticipate that those 2 last mile shuttle services will be starting up in the next month or so. We're just finalizing some details right now, getting our buses wrapped and getting our contracts wrapped up after going through an RFP process. And as we do that, we'll nail down the actual, the final details of those services. And as an operator too, I'll say that we do our best to make those services as responsive as possible to local needs. So as we look forward to the planning for these services, there will definitely be a focus on what adjustments need to be made to make it workable for the communities that we're serving.
Thank you, Teresa. One thing I did want to say, in that first map that Karen displayed, you saw a lot of blank areas. As green as Clackamas County is, those are our transit deserts, and there's population in there. There's homes and neighborhoods. They just happen to be blank and white because there's no transit provided in those areas. So just want to put that out there. That is something they're trying to find ways to fill those gaps and to cross that landscape. So we have time for one more question. So Councilor Sherman, fire away.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I think I almost heard the answer, but I'm not sure if I actually did. So, transit is so critical for growing inclusive communities. And one of the things, as we kind of look at the planning process, did you incorporate the ability to serve economically disadvantaged and non-white communities as part of this process, or was it kind of more, as Mayor Gamba expressed, just moving maximum number of people in the most efficient way possible? And I do appreciate the work. Thank you.
Yeah, so no, we did use an equity lens as a part of looking at how we started to put groups into the short term, the medium term, and the long term categories. And we also looked at kind of the different demographics of the population to understand what the service needs might be in those different areas. So there was a whole suite of different things that were looked at as those kind of connections were being developed.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, that's perfect timing. We're at 8 o'clock. We're at the top of the hour. And Trent, I'm going to turn the next item over to you.
Thank you very much. So we have 2 vacancies in the R1 Act, the Region 1 Area Commission on Transportation, which includes, I think y'all know this already, but we do have a few members. It includes Multnomah County, Washington County, Clackamas County, and Hood River County. And this is just one of the regions that that is captured underneath ODOT, and they send recommendations to the Oregon Transportation Commission, which is the sort of governing body for ODOT. We have several seats on there, but 2 vacancies. One of them is a city vacancy, and the other one is a community member vacancy, which actually has a member already who, it's just that the term is turning over. They are interested in returning to that seat. That's Bill Merchant. And so if this group agrees, can return, and this group is sort of giving me direction to do that, send a recommendation letter from C4 nominating, honestly, I think it's a nomination, Bill Merchant to continue in that capacity. And that term rolls over at the June meeting. And there is a meeting coming up on Monday, April 5th, and that's the only other meeting between now and June, the end of the term. So I can move that seat forward if this group agrees, and I can put a letter together with the co-chairs' signatures and make sure that that's submitted in time for Monday's meeting. But I have not heard from this group if there's interest to fill that city vacancy, which is not urgent for this coming Monday's meeting, because like I said, the term rolls over at the June meeting. So there's more time to have this discussion. I know that there are a lot of new elected officials in Clackamas County, and some of this is just, you know, getting into the position and learning what your capacities are as you're getting this committee assignment and that committee assignment and this committee assignment. It gets very busy very fast. And so I have a lot of respect for what y'all do and how much time y'all put into this outside of your normal jobs and the work of your cities. So let me just say that up front. But in the meantime, I do want y'all to think about this city vacancy for this seat. It is one more vote for Clackamas County at a regional table. And that's really where the value is for making sure that Clackamas County is there. And for this seat, rural and urban cities are eligible, although this group has sort of dedicated that seat to an urban city seat. But that's not a requirement. This group can do what you want. And so if you want to spend more time thinking about this, or if you want me to bring this back to the next C4 meeting, I am all ears for what you want to do. But I would say that the clock is ticking for that June meeting to be at that June R1 Act meeting. And I think your May C4 meeting is the only other chance to talk about that before the next R1 Act meeting after Monday. So I'm going to put that on the table for you. I need direction on Mr. Merchant to continue, and just feedback from you on how you want to proceed with the city seat.
Okay, I think what's in order on the first item with Mr. Merchant is probably a motion to appoint Bill Merchant to renew his role and fill that seat on the R1 Act. So is anyone willing to make a motion? Martin Myers?
Yeah, Bill Merchant is a great guy. He's out of the rural areas, and I'd like to see him into this position if he's willing to take it, and I understand he is. So I would make that motion.
I'll second.
And moved and seconded. I would just give a plug for Mr. Merchant. He's always there. He's always prepared, and he's very knowledgeable. And actually, he is. I'm going to give him credit for being one of the founders of the R1 Act, because without the rural folks like himself, there would not be an R1 Act. So he's not here with us tonight, but I just want to give him that shout out. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Instead of asking for those in favor, is there anyone against that? And I'll assume if there's not, it's a unanimous. Okay. Sounds like we're all good to go. So it's unanimous. Thank you so much. And I guess the cities, is there anyone, to Trent's point, I think we have now between now and June, there's no rush. But again, that meets probably every other month on a Monday evening around 5:30, 6 o'clock is usually the start time. Is that urban or rural? Maybe you said that, Trent, I missed it.
Yeah, there's no designation. It's one that we've made ourselves. We've had 2 urban city seats and 1 rural seat. And Mayor Hodson from Canby is the rural representative, and then Councilor, oh my gosh, Mr. Drake, Councilor Drake from Happy Valley is the urban city representative there at the table. And I would add, there was somebody who was interested, and they're, I think, a newer councilor, and they found out that the meeting for the R1 Act conflicts with their the night of their business meeting for their city. And so there was just a meeting conflict, which was a challenge.
Okay, great. So Mayor Gamma, is your hand up from the last round? I don't want to miss you if you meant to have your hand up.
Sorry, no, I was going to ask a question about Mr. Merchant, but the nominator answered my question. So,
okay,
thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Martin, is your hand still up or?
That is up.
I'm wondering how the unincorporated urban areas such as Oak Grove and Jennings Lodge play into R1, and whether there's any room for somebody, whether there's a need perhaps to reach out to those groups and see if there's somebody there who might be interested in taking it, or if they're covered somewhere else within that group. Thank you.
I believe it is specifically a city seat, so city elected official, and just a very large umbrella. Commissioner Savas sits on the table as the Clackamas County representative. So that is one way that position is covered, to cover the unincorporated area. But also there are 2 community members who sit on this seat. Mr. Merchant's one of them, and Mr. Bill Avison sits on the other one. I think both of those are, I think they're both rural unincorporated, but Commissioner Savas may correct me.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. And that's a good point, Martin. There's not really a specific seat for unincorporated urban. I do my best. So I guess I'm probably the designated person to be representing those folks. So next up is Councilor Sherman.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I would assume that, we'd like to spread this out a little bit. You would not want to have 2 Happy Valley councilors sitting in these on R1 Act. Is that a good assumption on my part?
That is a decision for the cities, not for Trent.
Fair enough. I guess what I would throw out to the group is I'm intrigued by it. I enjoy it, but I don't want to overload 2 Happy Valley councilors sitting on the same committee. So please, someone else step up and go for this. Thank you.
And I would add, just seeing a little bit of apprehension, it doesn't have to be a C4 member. Everybody has a bigger council than just what's represented here. And so maybe this is something that you take back to your councils and can bring back at the C4 Metro subcommittee meeting. If you want to keep it an urban seat, that gives you a couple of weeks. The next C4 Metro meeting is on April 14th. So that could be an opportunity to touch base with your team and come back and talk a little bit more about how to cover that. And I guess same for rural cities. If you're interested in spreading the wealth on that, there's more opportunities there too, because it's not necessarily designated this way. So yeah, I want to put that on the table, but I also am hearing a little bit of silence. And so maybe if you want to email me after the meeting or beyond that, Mary Fitzgerald, do you have a question?
Hand up. You're on mute. Julie, you're on mute.
Yes, we have our meetings on Mondays. And so I did want to confirm again, how often do they meet? Because somebody would have to miss a council meeting.
They roughly meet every other month. There have been a couple of busy seasons where they have gone back to back, but that's pretty rare.
Yeah, so I think it'd be pretty hard for us, sorry to say.
I think for us, because we have the role of, at least convening this discussion. So maybe what we'll do, if there's a head nods to do this, let's carve out maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes, perhaps, if the cities don't come together between now and the next C4 meeting, to let the cities caucus and see if there's either a member on your council or one of yourselves are interested in that position. And we can at least knock this out so we're ready to go for the June meeting. So the sooner we get someone on the R1 Act, again, it'll just enhance Clackamas County's representation with one more vote. So, and again, the cities, if there's an LOC meeting or some kind of a setting which you can all come to an agreement on that, that'd be great too. We'll take it any which way you can, but we do have to make it a process, a voting process here at C4 to forward that recommendation on to the R1 Act.
Actually, I think for the community members, that's true. For the city members, I think they can, okay. But we have just been helpful here with this forum. It's been helpful to facilitate that conversation at the same time. So if it is just a city's decision, or, you know, I could set something like that up. If there's not an LOC forum, just help me help you is what I'm asking.
Okay. Head nods for a 10-15 minute carve out next meeting. Thumbs up. Okay, great. Excellent. Absent any other action by the cities, that's what we'll do. So thank you. Trent, next up. Looks like we have updates. Or do you have anything else, Trent? Upcoming meeting?
Not for the R1 Act. Oh, just that there is a meeting coming up on Monday. And so for those folks who are interested, or maybe just want to check in or watch the preview to see what it's all about, there's an opportunity there.
Okay. So we have the JPAC updates, and Councilor Heisey is not with us, so I'll step in and just give you all that update. We had a presentation about the emergency routes discussion, which will be carrying on, I believe, into either the next JPAC meeting or the one following. And we, towards the latter part of the meeting, we talked briefly about, didn't have very much time. These have been very packed agendas, and there's really been little to no opportunity for comment by the members of JPAC. So there was a discussion on the earmarks, and I guess we have somewhat of a package. And of course, Clackamas County has part of its geography within the JPAC boundaries or metro boundaries, and part of it is not. So not a whole lot of conversation. And Councilor Lewis, do you have anything you want to add? You're a member of JPAC. Any other thing you want to add as far as an update or anything coming up?
I think coming up, continued monitoring of the federal package, particularly as we learn about the size that we can expect. And then something kind of procedural for JPAC. I think we've really struggled to get good discussion because we have so much coming at us, and I don't see that stopping, particularly with regional flexible funds, et cetera, coming this year. So I have requested staff to do a survey of all JPAC members to see if we can have our meetings scheduled for 2 hours. Currently they're 90 minutes. So that more people can actually speak. I know that we limited our public testimony. Mayor Walters had to go from like a 5-minute to a 3-minute to a 2-minute public testimony at the last meeting, as many of our elected officials did. And yeah, so just know that that is kind of a procedural thing that is up for debate and questioning, and hopefully it'll allow more airtime for the important discussion.
Yeah, I would just add, I think, and I know there's a lot on the agenda, but you know, hopefully with all the new members, we can play, the JPAC members, we can play a more substantive role in the discussion and the planning and the direction. And it seems it's been pretty heavy on presentation and very little time for any kind of dialogue. So Mayor Gamba, I see your hand up.
Yeah, so having sat through JPAC and MPAC meetings for the last 6 years, it's always mystified me that MPAC meets twice as often as JPAC and yet has ostensibly less that they're required to do. I've never quite understood that. It, to me, makes a lot of sense that JPAC should be meeting twice a month like MPAC does.
That's a great point, Mayor. That's a great point. So any other discussion on this one? We have Commissioner Schrader with us tonight and some other members of MPAC. So we get an MPAC update.
We actually went through this past time what our schedule was going to be for the year. It was a pretty light meeting. It ended early. Again, I think we had a bit of a conversation concerning what the federal dollars might look like for us. And I don't know if there's anybody else who's attending MPAC that wants to add if they've been at the last meeting. So.
Yeah, I can, I will agree. It was a light agenda. The only item I'll add is that the Metro update included a update on the Parks and Nature Bond that was passed in 2019. And the item of interest there for me that I wrote down was there was going to be released a new handbook for guidance on the local share of projects as part of that bond measure. And I don't know, Councilor Lewis, if that guidebook has been released yet. It sounded like it was about to be released or just released. I'm not sure, but probably of interest to the cities.
Yeah.
It was supposedly published the 19th. It only hit my inbox last week, but I can forward it to Trent to share with folks here, or at least the C4 Metro folks here.
Right. The Metro cities would be interested probably.
Okay.
Councilor Sherman, did I see your hand move?
I was just going to jump in. We did do the MPAC overview as well, which was, kind of interesting, revisiting the original goals of MPAC. And then also, I thought the update on the community placemaking grants was kind of interesting. It was intriguing to see how many grant applications are out there for how few dollars are available to them. So it's a very, very competitive process. That's about all I remember from that last meeting. Thank you.
Right.
Okay, great. Any other comments? Okay, Trent, you have retreat on the list.
I know, and I don't want to jinx it because we had to cancel the one last year because of COVID. And as vaccines began to start, getting a little bit more available, and we start getting closer to maybe possibly one day seeing each other again in the real space, I want to start thinking about some form of a retreat for this group. Now, again, there's a lot of new folks on here, but that's really where C4 has shined year to year. Is there's always an opportunity. There's always been an opportunity to spend a couple days together, usually like an overnight at the resort at the mountain. And it still may not look the same this year as it has in the past, but I'm starting to formulate a plan where, it might be a hybrid depending on the timing that this group wants to do, where perhaps we do like an outdoor social event, invitation only, or like, maybe no business, but if you want to sort of do some meet and greet for those people who feel comfortable doing something like at a winery or someplace outside during the sunny parts of the year here in Oregon. And then also complementing that with some Zoom time so that there's a space to do business safely, depending on when we choose to do this and how fast the vaccines are coming out. These are some of the things that are rolling through my head. I want to find a way for this group to have a chance to, just meld and have some of that social time. That's always been really beneficial for the C4 body. And so I'm really looking forward to putting something like that together. I'm thinking right now that it's probably going to be, again, late summer or early fall. So August, September, just giving those vaccines some time and getting everybody back to a comfort level. And we may need to assess it. But I'm thinking about the timing, I'm thinking about the place, and I'm thinking about the format, which means I also need to start thinking about the topics. And I heard Commissioner Savis mention something about transit earlier, which of course we're happy to tee up. But I want to just start setting the table for what this group could begin talking about at the business level, where here at these meetings, you have an hour and 45 minutes to cover usually a lot of stuff once a month. And the C4 retreat is usually a space to dive deeper into some of these topics and spend a little bit more time, have a couple of sessions back to back, which is really intimidating on Zoom. But again, if there's some sort of hybrid format, we might be able to put something together that's a little bit more fruitful, a little bit more engaging, and just a little bit more interactive for everybody. So I'm looking for ideas, looking for topics, looking for times, and we don't have to talk about it now. We can. We're a little early, which is the first time in a while because we've had a busy agenda at C4 for the last year. So kudos to y'all. If you want to spend some time now talking about it, just to brainstorm, that would be great for me. If you want to just email me stuff, that works too. So I'm all ears.
Yeah, this is a great time, and maybe what we can do, Trent, is put together a list of topics that we've heard from in the past, we're hearing from tonight, and just list them, and maybe we can just rank them at the next meeting, so we can kind of just start wrapping our heads around what we have for topics. Mayor Fitzgerald, I see your hand up.
Oh, thank you. I see Mayor Walters wrote down disaster resiliency and lessons learned. That would be great. And then I was also thinking it would be really useful to go to look ahead and think how we as cities can best be good partners on this housing initiative. It's a very complex topic. And I think that we're going to need, affordable housing and homelessness. We're going to need to start now in our cities to get ready to dovetail with that. And there's, that's an area that I think would be interesting.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Gambo, is your hand up?
You're muted.
Okay, great. Thank you. You're on mute if you're talking to us. Okay.
I was just apologizing for forgetting to take my hand down. Although I would concur with Mayor Fitzgerald on everything she just said.
Okay, great. Now, this just for those who are new, and to say it again, I know Trent said this during the orientation, but your executive committee, myself and Mayor Hodson and Mayor Stemple and Trent, who else is on there? Paul Gornick is part of that. We take your input and we set the agenda based on your input. Unlike a lot of organizations, we want to make sure this is working for you and you have ownership in what we discuss and what we put on the table. So I just want to let you all know that if there's something you want to talk about, we're going to make it happen.
Okay.
So I think we might actually have the first meeting of the year where we end early. And I know that you all want to have a safe, careful drive home. So any other business, anything for the good of the order? Seeing none, have a safe drive home. Thank you all.
Thanks.